Follow me to the sea. We're going down to meet a martyr, a man whose blood can make you clean. He bled for your forgiveness. He bled to make you free. So I'm standing as a witness to the mercy I receive.
Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to State Line. We are so glad that you are here this morning to sing and worship with us. We're going to start our service by singing a song together, so will you please stand with us as we sing this out together. Sing Saturday Was Silent. Saturday was silent, surely it was through. But since when has impossible ever stopped you? Yeah. Friday's disappointment, and Sunday's empty too. Since when has impossible ever stopped you? This is the sound of dry bones rattling. This is the phrase, make a dead man walk again. Open the grave, I'm coming out. I'm gonna live again. This is the sound of dry bones rattling. Pentecostal fire, stirring something new. Come on. You're not gonna run out of miracles anytime soon. We sing, 'cause resurrection power runs in my veins too. I believe there's another miracle here in this room. This is the sound of dry bones rattling. This is the praise, make a dead man walk again. Open the grave, I'm coming out. I'm gonna live again. This is the sound of dry bones rattling. Let's declare this truth together that my God is able to save, do whatever He wants. Let's sing this out. My God is able to save and deliver and heal and restore anything that He wants to. Just ask the man who was thrown on the bones of Elisha if there's anything that He can do. Just ask the stone that was rolled at the tomb in the garden. What happens when God says to move? Yeah. I feel Him doing it now. I feel Him doing it now. I feel Him doing it now. Do it now. Do it now. We sing. This is the sound of dry bones rattling. This is the praise, make a dead man walk again. Open the grave, I'm coming out. I'm gonna live again. Open the grave, I'm coming out. I'm gonna live again. Open the grave, I'm coming out. I'm gonna live again. This is the sound of dry bones rattling. This is the sound of dry bones rattling. Amen. Thanks for singing along. You can go ahead and have a seat.
Well, hello and good morning, State Line. My name is Tyler.
My name is Matt.
Thank you for joining us this morning. Beautiful fall weather out there.
Yeah.
What's your favorite fall activity?
My favorite fall activity
Yeah.
is rustling in the leaves.
Rustling in the leaves.
I like to rustle, so I'm a rustler.
You are a rustler.
I do.
Not
like
a wrestler,
How
but a
about you?
rustler.
What's your favorite?
I don't know. I'm so thrown off by that. Watching football, I was like
That's so normal.
rustling and the.
Yeah.
I don't know. Go ahead.
All right. Hey, well, welcome to State Line. If it is your first time, or maybe it's actually not your first time, and you've come a couple of times, or you've been here for a little bit, but you've never filled out one of the connection cards, there's connection cards in the seats in front of you, or if you're in the front row on the floor beneath you. If you're watching online, or maybe you're sitting in your seat and thinking, I don't want to touch that card, you can get on the app, and we've got it on there too, and it just gives us and lets us know that you're here. It's an easy way to take a small step in just getting more connected or learning more about State Line. And if you take that out to the Connection Center, we've got a free gift for you. If you fill it out online, we'll send it to your home.
That's
so,
true.
And yeah, it'll just keep you informed and everything going on.
Yep.
So.
Download the app as well. That's another way to stay connected. There's things on there like events that are coming up. One event that we have coming up is called our Welcome Lunch. Again, if you're relatively new to State Line and you want to hear a little bit more about who we are, meet some of the staff, hear our vision and our mission and values around why we and how we operate here at State Line, we'd love to invite you to that. It's free. We provide a lunch for you. There is childcare available, so make sure you register for that so we know you're coming.
Nice. Also, another thing we have coming up is we have an event coming up October 7th, which is a Thursday from 6:30 to 8 o'clock, and it's called Be Kind to Your Mind. And I was thinking about this, about that statement there. I think if most of us were as kind to our own self and our own thoughts as we were to other people, we would treat ourselves a whole lot different. And so this event is put on actually by people, State Liners, who are here, who are doing this event to help us. Maybe if you struggle with mental illness or mental health, or maybe you know somebody, or you're just saying, you know what, in this season of life, we want to be a lighthouse to people who are going through challenging things, which is everybody. There's not a type of person that deals with this. I deal with high-level leaders all the time, and I'm hearing from them and from others that a lot of people right now are just struggling with mental health. And this will help each one of us be better equipped in ourselves on how to deal with that, but also learning how to help others who might be struggling as well. And so it's something you can sign up on the app, on the events page, or online, but we'd love to have you be a part of that, and so that we can really be a light into our community, and creating State Line as a place that can do that for others. So.
Yeah. And speaking of being a light into our community, we've heard for a couple weeks about this trunk or treat event that we're going to be doing. And really what that is a way that we as a church can reach other people in our community and be a light and show and be the hands and feet of Jesus to other people. It's going to be partnered with the YMCA. It's going to be over closer to the west side of Rockford, and we're going to post up at this church, and we're going to register a whole bunch of cars. So if you haven't registered yet, register your vehicle, come decorated, or come not decorated, but come in a costume. I guess it's decorated. Come with your body decorated, and
your body decorated.
Bring a ton of candy. And here's what we're going to do: we're going to have people come through, and we're just going to love on them. We're going to give them candy. We're going to celebrate. We're just going to be that light, again, like Matt said, into another part of Rockford. So make sure you register your vehicle. If you're not going to come, if you know you're not going to be a part of that event, we'd love for you to donate candy. Just be generous with that. We have a table out there. Bring candy for the next couple weeks so that we can have way more candy than any human should consume there at that event.
I was just picturing when you said decorate your body.
Okay, careful.
You painted in navy blue and orange with like a helmet maybe on your head.
Just full body paint.
Just weird.
Yeah, I'm not going to do that.
It's a bad thought. I hope I didn't put that picture in any of your minds.
Yeah, that was good. So bring candy to the church, register your vehicle, one vehicle per family. It's going to be a blast. We're really excited about that. A way we can be generous to another part of our community. Something that we do around here is we talk about our partnership with Compassion International. And we as a church are a compassion church, meaning our international and global outreach strategy is through Compassion International. We have tons of kids. How many sponsored? Over 200 kids sponsored?
Over 300.
Over 300
About
kids sponsored
350.
as a church, which is bonkers, by the way.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah,
and
give yourself a hand. That's awesome.
Matt Kitchen is on staff with Compassion International, and we also have a church plant in Columbia And I just wanted Matt to give us an update on how our church plan is doing in our partnership with Compassion.
Yeah, it's really great. We're serving hundreds of kids as State Line in Barahona, Dominican Republic. There's 3 churches there that we serve. There's also the church plant in Sucre, Colombia, that we sponsor hundreds of kids. And what does that mean? And why do we sponsor these children? Is because they're living in extreme poverty. That means they live on less than $1.80 a day. And this has been a hard time for everybody. But the thing I'm so grateful for State Line is you guys haven't taken time off of being generous and giving of yourselves and giving of your time and giving of your resources to people who need them in some of the most devastated places in the world. And so as we're doing this, these children, we've been able to, in Colombia, provide almost 900,000 food baskets to families in Colombia.
900,000?
900,000. That's all of Colombia. We've been able to be a part of that. Earlier in the year, State Line gave $30,000 to help with disaster relief, meaning from COVID, and also some of the storms that we're having and a lot of the civil unrest that was going on. Same thing in the Dominican Republic. They went through 2 tropical storms / hurricanes, as well as COVID. And when I say that about Colombia is a country of about 9.1 million people. The Dominican Republic has just over 10 million. But that almost 27 million meals being provided in Colombia serve those 9.1 million people. So you think about that. And all the kids and families that are being served, because many of those families were living on 1 meal a day. And we can't even comprehend that. But you guys came in and are doing that for your sponsor child. We were doing that in bulk as we were giving to these places, giving hygiene kits to keep them safe and protected because they couldn't provide that themselves. Also helping them stay engaged with their education, having tutors and mentors visit them in their homes or connect them and get them resources to help them continue to grow. Helping the families that weren't able to work start small businesses so that they could, whether that's gardening in their home and or starting a whole new business, just that they could serve their local communities. But what was really being given was hope. Our desire is that every child would be loved, known, and connected. And we want to keep them connected in their education. We want to keep them connected so they're getting the food and the nutrition they need. We want to keep them so they're getting the medical treatment that they need. We were able to, in that country, also to do 27,000 helping people with medical procedures and help during that same time. And so you guys just blew it out of the water. But I want to just encourage you with one other thing. Greg last week said, he said, do something that God's given you. Whatever God's put in your hand, use it. And he used the example of writing somebody, just a quick note, or doing that. And we can all do that. We all have that ability. That's one of the great things about sponsoring a child that you guys are doing, is you get the opportunity to write that child and to encourage them and to infuse hope. Our president emeritus wrote a book, and it said, just one moment. And what the whole book is about is in one moment you can change the trajectory of a child's life just by speaking something into them. Because you know what a child will do if you tell them something? They'll believe it. And if we're telling them the right things about God's plan for their life and His love for them and how much you love and care about them and are praying for them and are remembering them and thinking of them and how special they are, they will believe it. And I just want to encourage you, take what God has put in your hand and use it to write a child during this time as well. But thank you so much for all the support we've been doing. It's great serving with you and getting to love on these kids together. So
and, you can, absolutely. And you can boil all of that down to just us as a church being generous by sponsoring children, by giving our tithes and our offering to help sponsor these different things like the disaster relief, and our generosity with our time by writing letters to our kids and helping give hope to them. But this church is such a generous church. You are generous people, and every week we have an opportunity to give back, to help to continue to do things like Matt talked about, but also to help continue to run the general operations of this church that help bring hope to people every single week. So your generosity makes a huge impact in people's lives right here in this building, in our community, and as Matt demonstrated all throughout the world. I'd love to pray for the offering. Will you pray with me? God, thank you so much for this church, this generous church. Thank you for how they love you through their generosity. I pray as we give back this morning, whether they're giving back digitally online or texting or dropping their offering in the box, whatever method they choose to give, God, I pray that you bless them through that, that you allow them to see a little bit more of you as they're generous, as they're open-handed with what you've blessed them with and us with. And so, God, as we give back, we pray that you take it and use it and multiply it for your kingdom. We love you so much, Jesus. In your name, amen.
Amen.
Well, we are going to continue to worship. I love to invite you to your feet, and we're going to keep singing.
Let's sing this together. You make it easy to love you. You are good and you are kind.
So good to sing songs together this morning that celebrate who God is and what He has done. But over the next few moments, we're going to sing a song that reminds us that no matter where we are in life, in the highs or the lows, that God is always with us. The Bible said He'll never leave us nor forsake us, and He will be with us even till the end of the age. So let's sing this truth together this morning. Here we go. There's a grace when the heart is under fire. Another way when the walls are closing in. And when I look at the space between where I used to be and this reckoning, I know I will never be alone. There'll be another in the fire standing next to me. There was another in the waters holding back the seas. And should I ever need reminding of how I've been set free, there is a cross that bears the burden where another died for me. There is another in the fire. All my dead left for dead beneath the waters. Yeah. And I'm no longer a slave to my sin anymore. Should I fall in the space between what remains of me and this reckoning? Either way, I won't bow to the things of this world. 'Cause we know, I know I will never be alone. There is another in the fire standing next to me. There is another in the waters holding back the seas. And should I ever need reminding where power set me free, there is a grave that holds nobody, and now the power lives in me. There is another in the fire. Oh, there is another in the fire. Oh, there is another in the fire. Oh, there is another in the fire. I can see the light in the darkness as the darkness bows to Him. I can hear the roar in the heavens as the space between resting. I can feel the ground shake beneath us as the prison walls cave in. Nothing stands between us. Nothing stands between us. There is no other name but the name that is Jesus. We believe that's true. He who was and still is and will be through it all. So come what may in the space between all the things unseen and this reckoning, I know I will never be alone. We know, so we sing this together. And I know I will never be alone. There'll be another in the fire standing next to me. There'll be another in the waters holding back the seas. And should I ever need reminding how good you've been to me, I'll count the joy from every battle, 'cause I know that's where count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. Amen. Thanks for singing along. You guys can go ahead and have a seat.
What's up? How's everybody doing today? So today is a big day. Today is a holy day. Today is the day that my buddy Justin Fields makes his first career start for the Chicago Bears. And I've been praying and processing, how do we do church today when there's something so significant that's going to happen in like circa 2.5 hours? And so in lieu of a sermon, we're all just going to pray now for the next 2.5 hours together. So it's circa, I'm kidding, kind of. Just be praying under your breath, please, for the Bears, that God gives him favor and blessings, because I'm super excited. But we are in part 2 of a series that we did start last week. And this big thing right here, if you do not recognize this, or if you weren't here last week, this is called a flannel graph board. This has been used in many of church basements for many of years to tell Sunday school variety stories to children. And so last week we talked about Big Mo, but this week we're going to look at Big Joe, the story of Joseph. So I figured before we dive into the scripture today, we're going to look at his story right here on the flannel graph. Are you guys ready for this? All right, the story starts with a man by the name of Jacob, and Jacob was a frisky man. He had many of children. He had 13 children to be exact, 12 of them boys, only one daughter. How would you have liked to have been that poor child, that poor girl? And one of those children was a young man by the name of Joseph, and he to his dad was the 12th of the 13 kids, but as this number 12, he was the goat. This was the one, the apple of his father's eye. He loved him so much that he gave him a fancy coat of many colors. Now, Joseph, he would wear this fancy coat of many colors, and then all of a sudden he had a dream. And he had this dream that all of his family would bow down to him, and so he was strutting his stuff like the peacock of the family. But as you could imagine, the brothers, they said, this is no bueno. We do not like that he has this dream. We don't like that he's strutting his stuff. And so they come up with a sinister plan to kill their brother Joseph. But they thought, no, murder, that's too dark. Instead, let's throw him into a pit. And as we throw him into the pit, we will take the coat back and give it back to Dad and tell him that the animals mauled him, but we're going to throw him in a pit and let's profit from this thing and let's sell him into slavery. And they did. And he went to a man by the name of Potiphar. And so now poor Joseph is all of a sudden a slave at a guy named Potiphar's house. This is in Egypt. As he's a slave, though, all of a sudden he begins to work really hard. He sees lots of success, so much so that he becomes the master of the house. He is in charge. He's running the show, all right? And he's so in charge. He's so figured it out that Potiphar's wife, we don't know her name. She just goes by Potiphar's wife. She takes notice of Joseph. He's a handsome man. I mean, look at him, for Pete's sakes. Devilishly charming, right? And so she decides, I'm going to seduce him. And so she puts on her best Victoria's Secrets,
All right, but the reality is, let's just say the secret was out. So she's trying to seduce Joseph, but Joseph is a man of character, and he says, I will not sin against God and against Potiphar. And so he puts on his Nikes, and he's like, I'm out of here. And so he runs away. Well, there's an old adage. I don't know how true this is, but the old adage is, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. She was heartbroken, and she was mad, and so she claimed that Joseph took advantage of her, and because of that, he gets sadly thrown into prison. Now, while he's in prison, two things happen. He meets a baker, and he meets a cupbearer, okay? And as he meets this baker and cupbearer, he's now running the prison, and these guys have dreams. Well, there's a rumor out that Joseph is quite the dream catcher. He can interpret dreams, so they have dreams, and he tells these guys what their dream means. He says to the baker, I'm so sorry, but sadly, your dream means you're going to die. It's like no good for you. But the cupbearer, he says, okay, what about my dream? And he says, oh, you're going to get your job back. Now, these guys happen to be in prison because Pharaoh, who they worked for, threw them in prison. I don't know if it's because he was serving keto cupcakes. I don't know if it was because he was serving Franzi a box wine. We're not sure why they got thrown in prison, but they were. And so Joseph makes this deal with the cupbearer. I'll interpret your dream, but when you go back to Pharaoh, you have to tell him about me. And so he goes back to Pharaoh, and all of a sudden, many years go by. And as years go by, Pharaoh himself has a dream. It's a little bit of a weird dream. He has a dream about some skinny cows coming out of the Nile. And he doesn't understand this dream, and the cupbearer goes, oh, wait a minute. Ha, I have a guy. His name is Joseph, and he's in prison. So they send for Joseph, and Joseph comes. He interprets the dream. The dream means that there's a famine coming to the land. We must prepare for the famine. And all of a sudden, Pharaoh says, this guy is really smart. He knows his stuff. So let's make him the master, the second in command of all of Egypt. He becomes the governor over the land. Now the famine hits, and all of a sudden, these guys are starving. Oh, we're starving. We're really hungry. Somebody give me a cookie. And they have to go to Egypt because they hear that in Egypt they have made storehouses of food. And lo and behold, they now interact with Joseph. But they didn't recognize Joseph because they weren't expecting him to be in Egypt. They thought maybe he was dead or was a slave somewhere. And he started playing a little bit of some mind games on his brothers, trying to trick them a little bit. But then ultimately he's like, surprise, it's me. And they're like, oh, no, it's him. He's going to kill us. And they bow down at his feet, and he says, don't worry. I won't kill you. I'm here to help you. And that is how Joseph saves the day. The story of Joseph in under 5 minutes. That's amazing. I'm impressed with myself. Now, if you look at Joseph's life in the narrative, his story actually spans 13 chapters of the Bible, and we're going to read verse by verse today, all 13 chapters. I'm kidding. You can read it later. It's Genesis 37 through Genesis 15, but these 13 chapters also span 13 years of his life between this moment where he gets a coat from his dad to the moment in which he is now working in Pharaoh's palace as the governor of Egypt. But ultimately, his dreams come true. But I think as we look at the life of Joseph, we realize this is a guy that I think many of us can relate to. I mean, he had trials, he had pain and heartbreak, he had broken promises, he had betrayal, he had family dysfunction, but you see a guy who, in spite of all of this, in spite of all the trials, in spite of all the heartbreak, he doesn't just survive, but he thrives. And I think it's safe to say, as you study the life of Joseph, that this would be a guy that we all wished we could be like. Because the reality is, we know life has troubles. Life has heartbreak, right? Life has pain sometimes. We're all going to go through them, but we would like to be the type of people who maybe don't just survive, though that's what some of us are trying to do. We're trying to get through to the next day. But at some point, can we not just survive, but can we thrive? And so we look at Joseph's life and we say, well, how? Like, how did he do that? Well, the logical answer is that, well, because God was with him, that God helped him. But let me pose a question for you guys today. Is not God with all of us? Does God somehow choose to be with some of us and not others? Yet some of us will see our dreams or our destinies or our purposes fulfilled, while sadly there are others who will not. And so I know in our heads sometimes we'll think, well, God is with some people in a special way versus others, but that's not true of the God of Scriptures. He promises that he's with us all. And you can't look at Joseph's outside circumstances as proof that God was with him, because for 13 years essentially of his life, through a lot of pain and heartbreak, to the cynic and doubter, they would say, how could God be with this guy if he has to go through so much trauma, right? So many troubles and so much heartbreak. So the proof that God was with Joseph wasn't shown in his circumstances. The proof that God was with Joseph was proven by his determination, by his grit, by his focus, by his commitment to honor God, do the right thing in the right way in spite of his circumstances. So maybe the secret sauce to Joseph's life isn't that secret. Maybe the reason we see that his dream is ultimately fulfilled is twofold. Yes, of course, he would not get to where he got if God wasn't with him and leading him and advancing him along the way. But because he knew God was with him, he was willing to bloom where he was planted, which is to say he made the most of every opportunity along the way. Now, there are a handful of plants, believe it or not, that are studied by horticulturists, by professors, because of their hardy nature, their rugged nature. Essentially, they're studying these plants to see, why do some plants survive when they shouldn't? Why do some plants tend to survive in rocky terrains or desert terrains, extreme climates, extreme conditions, and places that maybe they're not natural or organic to? Why do they do that? And there was this article I came across. I'm a nerd, I get it. It's an article from researchers from Purdue University, and they essentially were talking about, well, plants, they can't relocate, right? They don't have a choice. Once a plant is planted, they've got to bloom where they're planted. So for them to bloom where they're planted, their survival depends on two things. One, how quick can they detect the changes in their environment? And number two, can they deploy the right defensive strategies and adapt to those changes? And so this morning, I want to look at a few lessons from Joseph's life and plants on how we can be the types of people who adapt quickly to the changes in our environment, and that when changes come, when circumstances shift, when things maybe don't go as expected, we can deploy the right defensive strategy along the way. Why? So that we don't die when conditions become tough, that we don't falter, and maybe we don't just survive, but we thrive. We become the people who bloom where we're planted. And so I want to look at 5 lessons. I promise you we're going to move through these relatively quick. You're going to all feel like you're drinking from the fire hose this morning, okay? We're going to move through these fast because, like I said, his story encompasses 13 chapters of the Bible, so we don't have time to go through all of it. So your encouragement/homework is to go and read Genesis 37 through Genesis 50 if you want to read the entire meta-narrative of Joseph's life. So the first thing, okay, point number 1, to bloom where you're planted is to have a dream of promise. All right, diving into the scriptures, Genesis 37. Jacob loved Joseph more than any of his other children because Joseph had been born to him in his old age. So one day, Jacob had a special gift made for Joseph, a beautiful robe. But his brothers hated Joseph because their father loved him more than the rest of them. They couldn't say a kind word to him. One night, Joseph had a dream, and when he told his brothers about the dream, they hated him all the more than ever. So Joseph is, as I've already said, the apple of his father's eye, and because his dad loves him so much, this thing is heavy, by the way, he makes him the amazing Technicolor dream coat, right? He makes him this coat, and this coat would have been a symbol of power, a symbol of majesty, a symbol of authority. If he twirled just right, maybe you'd see all the colors, right? Some scholars even believe that this coat represented Jacob's intention to give the birthright to Joseph. Now, the birthright contained like a double blessing, a double inheritance. This was a big deal in ancient Jewish culture. And if this was his intention, you have to understand how big of a deal this is, because this should go to the firstborn son, and he is number 12 of 13, the 11th of 12 boys. Right? He's way down rungs of the ladder. On top of that, he has dreams, 2 to be exact, and they represent his family bowing to him. Now, he's not wise enough as a 17-year-old. I'm sure you 17-year-olds in the room, you're much wiser than Joseph was. But he has this dream, and he gets cocky. He's peacocking around. He's strutting his stuff. I had a dream. Look at my coat. Y'all gonna bow to me, right? Well, you got to imagine his brother's here. I cannot wear this thing anymore. It's heavy and it's gonna make me sweat, and I sweat anyways because I'm Italian. That's how we roll. But anyways, don't judge me. But anyways, so he's strutting his stuff, right? He's peacocking around his family. Now just imagine this for a second. Why don't you try this? You go home today and call all your family members and you tell them that they're gonna bow down to you one day, and see how well that goes if you try to do that with a straight face. They would look at you and say, "You crazy," right? They'd be like, "You're insane." But here's the thing about a dream. It doesn't matter how crazy it is if you know it comes from God. Because if a dream comes from God, it's always the foreshadowing of a promise. And a dream is important to blooming where you're planted because it's the seed that starts you on the journey towards your greater plan. It's the seed that gives you a vision for a purpose that's bigger than just your life right now in the moment. It gives you a sense that your life was made for more. And that's why one of the saddest things is when someone has no dream, when people have no hope. A few years ago, I was talking to a friend of mine, and he worked at a transitional school here in Rockford, and he said one of his greatest challenges in this school was not educating the kids. Kids can learn, right? Most kids can learn if they have a desire, right? If they have some intentional focus, people are helping them, contextualizing studies for them. The problem wasn't getting these kids to learn. The problem was getting these kids to dream, to have hope. Because for most of these kids, they believed that the end game for their life was hitting 20. That if they could hit 20 years old, then that would be a huge milestone for them. Well, what kind of vision can you have for your life if you think the end game is 20? Right? Like how big of a purpose and a dream can you have that will keep you on a straight and narrow, that keep you pursuing an education, that will keep you going towards a career path, that will keep you towards making right choices if all you think is you're going to live a few more years longer? And thus you can see how significant it is to have a dream, to have a vision for your life that's bigger than just today or even tomorrow, something that drives you. Because when you have a dream and a vision for your life compounded with a promise from God, it literally can change everything. It's the fuel that changes your daily pursuit into a purpose, passionate commitment towards God. Second thing, to bloom where we're planted, is to persevere the pits. Genesis 37. "Here comes that dreamer," they exclaimed. This is the brothers talking. "Come on, let's kill him and throw him into a deep pit. We can tell our father that a wild animal has eaten him. Then we'll see what becomes of all his dreams." So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the robe of many colors that he wore, and they took him and threw him into a pit. Now, jealousy is a dangerous emotion. And look at what it caused his brothers to do. I mean, you could read this narrative and forget that they were family, right? They're plotting a murder. They toss him into a pit. Ultimately, Judah, one of the brothers, is like, "Oh, let's not kill him. Let's just profit off this endeavor." And they sell him to slavers who ultimately sell him to Potiphar. That's how he ends up in Potiphar's house. But pits do come in life. And what exactly is a pit? Well, a pit is a situation or a circumstance that often happens outside of your control. It's not your fault, but it happened to you or it happened around you, which means you have to deal with the fallout of the pain. You have to deal with the loss, or you have to deal with the trauma. And this is just the sad truth in life, is many of times the pits that come in our story, they come from our brothers. Those we thought would never betray us. Those we thought would never hurt us. Those who we thought had our back. And it seems like those wounds that come from those ultimately closest to us, they tend to cut a little bit deeper, don't they? And it's in these moments when we find ourselves in the pit that human nature makes us inclined to ask this question: why? Why am I going through this? Why is this happening to me? Why? Right? Over and over. And that's normal. And many of us, all of us, in some way, shape, or form have been there. But there has to be a shift at some point to bloom where you're planted. where you persevere the pit, which is to say you adapt as fast as possible and begin to deploy the right strategy to make the right next step. Because you can't control what happens sometimes to you, but you can control what you do after it happens, right? And so you can now make the right next choice to bloom where you're planted. And to do that, you have to shift from why to what as quickly as possible. Because if you just feel sorry for yourself, which once again, depending on the level of trauma or pain, that's totally normal. But if you stay in a pitiful state, you'll stay in the pit, right? If you're only going to ask why and keep feeling sorry for yourself, chances are you won't adapt, you won't change, you won't grow. It'll just keep you stuck. As fast as you can say, okay, now what? What do I do? Do I go get counseling, right? Do I go to the seminar that the church is having in just a couple weeks? Do I start some new disciplines? Do I make some new friends? Do I go to the gym? What do I need to do, right? As opposed to why is this happening? As fast as you can shift to what, you are now on the path to recovery. You're now on the path to thrive. You are now on the path to bloom. And so I want you to see what Joseph did. Verse 2, Genesis 39. The Lord was with Joseph. So he succeeded in everything he did as he served in the home of his Egyptian master. Potiphar noticed this and realized that the Lord was with Joseph, giving him success in everything he did. This pleased Potiphar, so he soon made Joseph his personal attendant. He put him in charge of his entire household and everything he owned. And so we see right here in these 3 verses that God's presence is clearly with Joseph, but it's empowering him to bloom. It's empowering him that it literally says everything he did, right? He has the Midas touch. Everything he does, it becomes successful because he has changed his perspective. He's not going to be pitiful. He's going to make the most of his situation, and he blooms where he's planted. So he doesn't complain. He doesn't whine. He doesn't falter. Instead, he flourishes. And when pits come, as fast as you can transition from why to what is the path when you are now beginning to crawl out of the pit. Number 3. The third thing to bloom where you're planted is to resist temptation's pull. Genesis 39. Joseph was a very handsome and well-built young man, and Potiphar's wife soon began to look at him lustfully. "Come and sleep with me," she demanded. But Joseph refused. "Look," he told her, "my master trusts me with everything in his entire household. No one here has more authority than I do. He has held nothing back from me except you, because you are his wife. How could I do such a wicked thing? It would be a great sin against God." She kept putting pressure on Joseph day after day, but he refused to sleep with her, and he kept out of her way as much as possible. One day, however, no one else was around. When he went in to do his work, she came and grabbed him by his cloak, demanding, "Come on, sleep with me." Joseph tore himself away, but he left his cloak in her hands as he ran from the house. And so in this story here, we see Potiphar's wife. She gets an A for persistence, right? She is just like going after dude. She is trying. It literally says day after day, she would go after Joseph. But if she gets an A for persistence, that means Joseph gets an A++ for perseverance and character. Because day after day, he would refuse over and over and over again. And he knew that if he were to do this thing, it wouldn't just be a sin against himself. It wouldn't just be a sin against her. It wouldn't just be a sin against Potiphar. It would be a sin against God. And sometimes when we find ourselves in situations where we're tempted, situations to take a shortcut, take the easy path, maybe do something we know we shouldn't do, many times if we make excuses that only regard ourselves, right, or our own flesh, we can rationalize those away. But Joseph knew this would be a sin against God. And when we have the mindset that when we sin, we're driving a wedge in our relationship with God, it makes that sin much harder to rationalize. Plus, you have to remember something. He had a dream, right? And the dream gave him a bigger picture or a vision for his life. He had a goal, he had a destination, which told him, I have to endure trials and troubles and the pull of temptation, or it will take me off the path. It will derail me. There's a race, right? Boston Marathon, famous race. On mile 20, there's something called Heartbreak Hill. And that's when runners hit the wall, when they want to give up. So it's kind of appropriate that the steepest, hardest hill of the entire race comes at mile 20. Well, temptation is to quit, right? You're tired, you're worn out. Well, you only lose the race if you stop. But you have to push, you have to continue. But what motivates people to get through Heartbreak Hill so they don't have heartbreak is the finish line. A dream, a goal, a vision, right? And so, once again, as she persisted, so did Joseph's resolve, because he knew nothing would derail him from God's vision for his life. Nothing would derail him from God's purpose and blessing than sin. And so as the situation got more serious, so did his resistance, and he ran. And when he did, he left his cloak behind. And she used this cloak because she's mad, right? She's angry. She's scorned to falsely accuse him of trying to take advantage of her. And his reward for doing the right thing is he gets to go to jail. Yay! But here's the truth. Nothing will kill the bloom in your life faster than sin. Because sin will pour honey in your ear, and it will seem fun, and it'll seem tempting, but all it does is steal, kill, and destroy. But if you have a promise from God, if you have a vision for your life that's just bigger than yourself, that can be the motivator that will keep you running on the path that you're supposed to stay on, even if it means it'll cost you in the moment. Because sometimes doing the right thing, it does cost you in the moment. Somebody may make fun of you. You may feel excluded. You may not get that promotion at work, right? It may cost you in the moment, but there's no price on your integrity, and there's no price on your relationship with God. The fourth thing, to bloom where you're planted, is to persist in prison. Genesis 39:22. Before long, the warden put Joseph in charge of all the other prisoners and over everything that happened in the prison. The warden had no more worries because Joseph took care of everything. The Lord was with him and caused everything he did to succeed. As I read this little passage right here, now at this point in Joseph's life, this is not shocking. He has a pattern of success, right? We've already established that when pits come, he shifts from why to what as fast as possible. He has a pattern of success because his mindset is, I'm going to bloom where I'm planted. His mindset is, I'm going to make the most of the situation that I'm in right now. And so now he's running prison life, okay? So he's like, I don't know what that looks like back then, but maybe he's like the leader of the prison gangs. I don't know, right? He's running prison life, and Pharaoh's cupbearer and his baker are imprisoned because they somehow, and the Bible's not super clear, but they somehow made Pharaoh mad. And so they're imprisoned, and while they're in prison, they have dreams. Rumor has it Joseph's this great dream interpreter, and he makes this deal with the cupbearer, like we looked at in the story. He makes this deal. He says, if I tell you what your dream means, you got to do me a favor. You got to get me out of here, man. Like he tells him his story. I'm not supposed to be here. I've been falsely accused. I'm making the most of my situation, but this is not my destiny. I was not meant to be in prison. You got to help me. And the cupbearer's like, okay, if you tell me my dream, then I'll make sure that when I get out of here, I will tell Pharaoh about you. So let's look at this. Genesis 40:23. Pharaoh's chief cupbearer, however, forgot all about Joseph, never giving him another thought. Awesome. Good friends. Solidarity, brothers. We shared them stripes in prison for a reason, right? What? Literally, the very guy who helps him feel encouraged and survive prison is Joseph. And when he gets out, it says right here, he just forgets about him. Prison is one of the hardest times for us because it's the time we have to wait. And nobody likes to wait. Sometimes we'd rather have obstacles or a fight or a scrap in front of us because at least it means we get to engage. At least it means we get to do something. But the waiting game, just waiting on God, that's brutal. And it's really hard because we've done all we know to do. We've prayed the prayers we're supposed to pray. We've read the scriptures we're supposed to read, right? We've done what we know to do, and all we can do at this point now is wait. The situation is outside the realm of our control. And many of us have found ourselves in moments where we're playing the waiting game. Could be something with a relationship, could be something with your career, could be a waiting game with your finances or your health, right? All of us probably have been at a point where we've had to wait on God. And it's really hard to wait. It takes so much faith and trust. And the reality is that's all we can do when we find ourselves in the waiting game is trust God. I went just a couple weeks ago. I was actually in Montana at a pastor's retreat. And while we were there, we went to the Bighorn River and we were fly fishing. And fly fishing is pretty cool. It's different than what I expected. There's quite a rhythm to it. There's quite an art form. And if you go too hard, you go too fast, literally like everything explodes into a knot. And so like you got to learn and listen to the guide. And this was the beauty of this trip is we had a guide with us. And the guide would give us instruction on what to do, how to cast, every single thing you needed to know. And the river, the Bighorn River that we were on, it's a no-motor river. So the entire time they're rowing the boat and they're getting you in position that you need to be in to catch the fish. And so they have all these little holes, all these little spots in the river. They've perfectly mapped out the river because this is what they do with their life, right? They know the river. They know what's happening. They get you in perfect position to catch fish as long as you do what they tell you to do. And so as he gets you in position, he'll like slowly row to hold you in one spot. And he's like, okay, cast 10 to 12 feet off the left side of the boat or go 10 to 12 feet off the right side of the boat. And so you're doing it and you're casting. And there's kind of like this idea when you're fly fishing, it's kind of fun too because you want to like, do the thing, right? You see him doing it and it's like this, like, okay, I want to Statue of Liberty that sucker back and go back out. And as I was doing it, he would look at me, the guide, he would look at me and he'd say, Greg, you're doing too much. Greg, slow down. You're going too fast. You're too far. That's not where I need you to be. I need you at 10 feet. You're at 15 feet, right? And so he would say this over and over and over to me. He'd say, Greg, just let it soak. Greg, let it soak. Like, let it soak. Quit trying to do too much. Quit trying to overwork it. Just let it soak. Andrew just bought a sign the other day. It's actually up on our fireplace mantle, and it just simply says, I trust the next chapter because I know the author. And there's this mentality I think we have when we're doing the waiting game. We got to do more, right? We have to work harder. Well, there's got to be something else I'm supposed to do because that's like Americana. That's like our mental mind tells us we've got to do more. And so we're striving and we're earning and we're trying. And God sometimes is saying, I've perfectly positioned you where you need to be. Do you trust me? Don't try to do more. Don't try to do less. I mean, you got to cast it out there, but just let it soak. And if you let it soak, trust me for the results. I'm the guide. I'm the one who's positioned you on the river. I'm the one who knows where you're supposed to be. And so sometimes there's a reason we are waiting. And it's because God is doing something beneath the waterline that we can't see that's helping us become the person we're meant to be. And if you look at the life of Joseph, 2 more years go by before all of a sudden Pharaoh has his dream. And the cupbearer's like, oh yeah, I got a guy. Right? It comes back to him. He has this epiphany and he has this dream. And it meant a famine was coming to the land and that they should prepare for it. And so look at this verse, Genesis 41, verse 39. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has revealed the meaning of the dreams to you, clearly no one else is as intelligent or wise as you are. You will be in charge of my court, and all my people will take orders from you. Only I, sitting on my throne, will have a rank higher than yours. Pharaoh said to Joseph, I hereby put you in charge of the entire land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh removed his signet ring from his hand and placed it on Joseph's finger. I mean, this is the symbol of authority, like you have his power. And he dressed him in fine linen clothing and hung a gold chain around his neck. I want you to notice something. Joseph, now in Egypt, gets a brand new coat. Fine linen, blingy gold, popping ring right here on the finger. And what did this robe represent? Power, authority, status, just like the one his dad gave him 13 years earlier, except this robe, because this one had been ordained by God, was not something that could be stripped from him, much like Potiphar's wife stripped him of his cloak, much like his brothers had stripped him of his coat. This one could not be taken from him. And this one didn't represent power over a family or power over a home. This one gave him power over an entire nation. God had perfectly positioned the life of Joseph to put him in a place where he could be a blessing to multiple people across nations because he bloomed where he was planted. He refused to give up or give in when the trials in his life had come, because he looked at what was happening, the environment around him, and he adapted. And the fifth thing, to bloom where you're planted, is to put the palace in perspective. Arguably one of the more famous passages in the book of Genesis, Genesis 50, 18 through 20, says, "Then his brothers came and threw themselves down before Joseph. 'Look, we are your slaves,' they said. But Joseph replied, 'Don't be afraid of me. Am I God that I can punish you? You intended to harm me, but God intended it all for good. He brought me to this position so I could save the lives of many people.'" And so there's a lot that happens here with Joseph and his brothers. I don't have time to retell the entire situation or story, but lo and behold, they come and they're bowing down before Joseph. They had come looking for help during a famine, and they were afraid that Joseph would want revenge for all of the pain. But this is not the same Joseph that was 17. This Joseph at age 30 has matured. He's grown a little wiser. Not the same cocky kid that he was. He's grown up. You see, the old Joseph thought he deserved respect, but this one was actually worthy of it. The old Joseph would brag about his dreams, but this one would brag on God's plans, because this Joseph knew that God always positions you for a kingdom impact that's greater than yourself, not just for personal gain. Years ago, maybe he wanted to wear that coat for personal gain, but now he was wearing that coat for kingdom impact, for the gain of others, for the nation of Israel. And so Joseph knew that God had brought him from a promise, through a pit, through temptation's pull, through a prison, to a palace, so that as he wore this coat now, he could use it ultimately to help others, to literally save a nation, two nations really, Egypt and Israel, from starvation. And then those of you who kind of study looking for Christ in the Bible and the Old Testament, I can't help but read this story and think about what Jesus did for us. Jesus was betrayed. He was sold by one of his brothers, Judas. He was stripped of his clothes. He was beaten. He was abused. He was thrown in a pit of despair, but he never wavered. He ran from the temptation to give up. He went to the prison of death. And when he went to the prison of death, what did he do? He waited. 3 long days in the grave. Once again, never wavered from the plan. And what the enemy meant for evil, God meant for good. And he was resurrected and clothed with all majesty, with all power, with all authority, all glory. And he endured all of that for us. He did all of that to advance God's kingdom, not just for personal gain. He did all of that because we were starving. We ourselves were in famine and dead. And he was the one who would bring us back to life. So as you think about your own life, no matter where you're at on your journey, between a promise and maybe there's some pain and prisons and pits and temptations pull in between, and the fulfillment of that promise, stay focused on God. Run your race. Have a dream, a vision for your life that keeps you on the straight and narrow. And you do it because remember, Jesus did it for you. And if that means as you're on your race, you've got to adapt and adapt. If that means you've got to deploy. Whatever strategies you need to bloom where you're planted, do it. And I know some of us, we think about our lives, we think about the mistakes we've made, we think about the things that have happened to us, and we have this narrative in our heads. Many of us are playing this narrative in our heads right now where we're saying, well, it's too late for me. I've already screwed up too far. My relationships are too far gone, or too much damage has been done, too much heartbreak. My anxiety, my depression is overwhelming, right? We say it's too late for me. I came across another interesting, fascinating story this week, and they found some seeds in Israel at the ancient archaeological site of Masada. This was an ancient Jewish fortress. And these seeds were 2,000 years old. And not only did they find these seeds, this was of a extinct variety of trees. So this was a tree that at this point they had thought had existed, but no longer was in existence. And so these scientists wanted to see if they could bring this tree from 2,000-year-old seeds back to life and make them grow. And so the experiment started. And so they took the seeds and they soaked them in water. They added some hormones, some Miracle-Gro. I don't know exactly what. I'm sure it was better than that. But they added some stuff to the seeds to bring them back to health. And when they felt like they had the seeds to a point where after soaking them in water and bringing them back to health in what is the longest germination period ever known to man, they were able to plant these seeds and grow Judean date trees. But not only were they able to plant these things, these trees were literally able then years later to harvest fruit, to make dates. They named one of the trees Methuselah. And if you're a Bible scholar, you know he was the oldest man who lived in the Bible. And all of this happened, and it took years for it to happen. But they were able to take a seed from a dead tree, an extinct tree, and bring it back to life, which is just amazing. And there's a seed inside of you. And it may be dormant. It may even feel dead. It may feel extinct. It may feel like your dreams, your hopes, your purpose is gone. But if you just let it soak, if you just immerse yourself in the grace of God, let God now begin to nurse you back to health as you grow and pursue Him. Surrender your life to Him. You let it soak and you let health come back. Then over time, that's not to say it doesn't happen immediately, right? God's got to work beneath the waterline. He's got to work beneath the surface of the dirt. But as He's working in your life, something will begin to bloom. And if you keep doing the right things over the right period of time, not only will it bloom, but you'll see yourself moving from survive to thrive. And there's a reason ancient Jews actually viewed the palm tree as the symbol of the grace of God. Isn't that beautiful? They viewed it as a symbol of the grace of God, which is to say that God's grace is the spark inside of you that brings dead things to life. God's grace is the thing inside of you that takes graves and turns them into gardens. Right? He's the one. And so that's what we're going to do right now, is we're just going to let it soak. We're going to spend some time focusing on the grace of God. Some of us, we know. We have a vision for our life that's been lost, and we've got to rediscover that. Others of us, we're in the middle of a pit right now. We're in the middle of a prison right now. We're playing the waiting game right now. We're fighting some temptation in our life, and we're just going to soak right now in the grace of God. Let Him speak to our hearts, encourage us, right? Build us up in our faith so that we as a church, we as people are people who don't just survive, we thrive, because we will bloom where we're planted. Let me pray for you. God, as we sing this song, I pray you encourage the hearts and the minds and the souls of the people here, that we just soak in your grace. We celebrate your grace. We're going to sing about how awesome you are, how you turn graves into gardens, and let that be an anthem of hope for everybody in this room, that we know our stories aren't done, that there's still a vision for tomorrow, that you have something better and greater for us. And yes, we have a role to play in that. And encourage us to fight the fight, to run our race. In the name of Jesus, I pray. Amen.
Will you stand with us as we sing in response? I searched the world, but it couldn't fill me. Man's empty praise and treasure faith are never enough. Then you came along and put me back together, and every desire is now satisfied here in your love. And we sing this together. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. Oh, I know it's true, and I'm not afraid to show you my weakness, failures and flaws. Lord, you've seen them all, and you still call me friend. 'Cause the God of the mountain is the God of the valley. Yeah. There's not a place your mercy and grace won't find me again. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. We sing it again. remember this morning as we go out to bloom where we're planted. Because of God's love for us, we have the ability to bloom where we're planted. Because God turns graves into gardens. So go in peace to love and serve the Lord this week as you go and love your neighbor and love God. Go in peace. You are dismissed. We'll see you next time.